Good afternoon and good morning. I am very excited to welcome you to the annual webinar sponsored by the Crash Modification Factors Clearinghouse team. My name is Sarah Weissman-Pasquale, and I'm with the FHWA. I'm the program manager for FHWA for the CMF Clearinghouse. And for today's webinar, we will be talking about the latest and greatest. Let's talk about CMFs, bicycle treatments, and RRFBs. Next slide, please. First item in the introduction, please know that our presentations here today do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FHWA or the U.S. Department of Transportation, nor do they reflect the official policy of U.S. DOT. We are here with several external speakers, and my many thanks to them for giving of their expertise and time today. Feel free to read the disclaimers if you like. Otherwise, next slide, please. So we have a full agenda for you guys today. Again, my name is Sarah Weissman-Pasquale, and I'm with FHWA. Srini and I will get things started by providing an overview of CMFs and the CMF Clearinghouse. But first, I'm going to ask Srini and each of our presenters to introduce themselves. So, Srini?
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. I'm Raghavan Srinivasan. I'm with the UNC Highway Safety Research Center. So as Sarah mentioned, we're going to share this introductory presentation to provide an overview of the CMF Clearinghouse and any resources that we have available for your assistance. Thank you.
Thanks, Srini. Rahul?
Hello, everybody. Rahul Avalar with IIHS. I'll be giving you a quick overview of this research we did a few years back on bicycle treatments at intersections. So glad to be here.
Thanks. Amrita?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning. I am Amrita Goswami. I'm currently working as an ITS engineer at AECOM. I would be presenting on RRFB, a study that I conducted while at University of Central Florida as a postdoctoral scholar. Thank you.
Great. And these will be some very interesting presentations on how CMFs are being practiced in the field, but we'll save some time at the end. There will be time after each of the presenters to ask a few Q&A, and then we'll also have time at the end after that, and then we'll wrap up with some additional information and direction. So next slide. Before we get started, I do have a couple of housekeeping items. First, all participants are muted due to the large number of folks here today, so thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A button to add your question. Questions that have been answered are visible to everyone, and we will do our best to answer each question as they come in. And at the end, some of them will be live during our remaining discussion time. Please note that the webinar is being recorded so that we can post it, as well as the presentation PowerPoints to the CMF Clearinghouse website following the webinar. Finally, there's a helpful Zoom tip. Choose the speaker view option at the top of your Zoom screen to optimize the screen of the current speaker. If you're having a technical issue during the webinar, you can send a chat to the host and we will do our best to assist you directly. All right, next slide. We also have questions for you that we'll ask via a poll throughout the webinar, starting with this first one to help us determine how many participants we have with us today. Caroline already started the poll. Thank you very much. So if you guys could take a moment to respond to the question and tell us how many people are attending from your location. So obviously we have options. There's 1, 2, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, or 6 or more. So we'll just give that a few moments for everybody to have a chance to add their responses. Okay, so it looks like for the majority of our folks, it is just one person, but we have, that's about 87%. 5% of the logins are with 2 people, 4% are with 3 people, 2% are with 4 people, and nobody with 5 people in the room, but we do have 3% with 6 or more. So welcome, everybody. All right, and the second question relates to your organization. So we know who is joining us today. If you're there with a group, go ahead, and Caroline, first, I'm gonna have you put up poll number 1, but question 2 for everybody. If you're there with a group, go ahead and select the organization type that most reflects a majority of the group or each participant in the room. I believe there might be a QR code, and let's hold on for just a moment.
Sorry about that, Sarah. For some reason, the second poll is not popping up. I will do my best to figure it out and pop it up in just a second.
Not a problem. We'll give everybody a chance to sort of catch up. Awesome. All right, so we're not doing the QR code. That's totally fine. So again, if you guys are there with a group, go ahead and select the organization type that most reflects a majority. I assume that if you're in one room, you're probably all from the same type of organization. So the question being, what type of organization do you or does your group work for? We have options: state DOT, other DOT like county or city, etc., university, industry, organization, FHWA, other federal agency like sister agencies, NHTSA and FMCSA, and other. We have not captured you from any of the other options. So go ahead and send us your thoughts on that, and we'll summarize in just a moment. Okay, great. So it looks to be about just under half, so 45% are from state DOTs, so welcome. 16% from other DOTs, so counties and cities and what have you. 3% are from university, 24% from industry, 3% from organizations, 3% from FHWA, and it looks like 5% from other. So welcome everybody. And the reason, I just wanted to clarify, the reason I'm reading out the summary of the poll results is for when we do post this webinar. Unfortunately, the closed captioning does a great job of writing down everything that we say, but for folks for 508 compliance, it does not capture poll results. So we're just going to go over those quickly so that if anybody needs that, they can listen to what you guys were saying. All right, so moving on to an overview of the CMF Clearinghouse. We can skip ahead one more slide as well. Thank you. All right, so we have a mixture of folks out there today and some who are just learning about crash modification factors, or CMFs, for the first time. So what is a crash modification factor? Well, in highway and traffic safety, we have studied the effects that many design, safety, and operations treatments have on how many crashes we experience after the treatment is implemented. A CMF is a multiplicative factor that reflects the expected safety effectiveness of a countermeasure. With this simple number, we have a data-driven value that we can do so much with. We can use data-driven analysis to compare the expected benefit to cost of project alternatives and have conversations with our peers about how well countermeasures, such as curve warning signage or roundabouts and rumble strips, work to improve safety. As we can see from the table, a CMF of 1.0 would indicate no change in crashes after countermeasure installed, as in nothing has changed. A CMF below 1 means that we expect to have a decrease in crashes, and a CMF above 1 means that we expect to have an increase in crashes after the treatment or project. We express these in terms of decimals, but we can also discuss these in terms of percent reduction or increase in crashes. If we're fortunate enough to have a CMF of 0, we'd expect 100% reduction in crashes. A CMF of 0.8 indicates a 20% reduction in crashes, and a CMF of 1.2 would indicate a 20% increase in crashes. Next slide, please. The CMF Clearinghouse is a central repository where we strive to store every CMF that has been developed by universities, transportation agencies, and others around the world. It is regularly updated, typically every quarter, and provides practitioners a way to search for and use the good work you all do to improve safety. We also have information posted on the website for your use in working with and understanding the methodology for analyzing CMFs, as well as links to research, case studies, and training. Plus, the CMF Clearinghouse also hosts state selected CMFs lists. Several states have developed their own internal state CMF lists, and generally the states compiled these lists so that there would be consistency in CMF use across their state. These CMFs were identified from the CMF Clearinghouse as well as other resources. Srini will show you a bit more of the website functionality shortly. Next slide, please. We're always interested to learn about how you use the CMF Clearinghouse. We have a poll to help us find out how much you use it. Please answer how often you use this resource in your day-to-day responsibilities. So the options are daily, weekly, monthly, once or twice per year, or never. We'll just give everybody a moment there. Okay, so it looks like just about 1% of you use it daily, 11% weekly, 31% monthly, 36% once or twice per year, and 22% never. It'll be interesting if you have any thoughts on why you don't use it. Maybe you're brand new to it or whatnot. Feel free to put that into, I believe everybody has access to the chat, so separate from the Q&A. All right. And next, we'd very much like to understand how users handle multiple CMFs for the same countermeasure. As a clearinghouse of CMFs, it's not uncommon for multiple research studies to calculate CMFs for the same countermeasure, resulting in multiple options, sometimes ranging from a reduction in crashes to an increase. Hopefully not, but sometimes it happens. In these instances, how do you, as users, select the CMF you use? Do you select a single CMF or do you combine them? So we're asking for folks to respond, how do you handle these multiple CMFs for the same countermeasure? Options being, I combine them myself, I only pick the one that best matches my criteria and needs. There are multiple CMFs for the same countermeasure, question mark, as in you didn't know that that happened, or I ignore them. Come to think of it, Caroline, I think we should have had an other option, but oh, somebody's just said in the chat, they use the star rating for CMFs, great option. Yes, I think next time we'll have an other option in addition to these four. All right, so it looks to be about 17% of you guys combine them yourselves, 71% pick one that best matches your criteria and needs, 11% were asking yourselves, there are multiple CMFs for the same countermeasure, and 1% ignore them. Plus, thank you very much, that's good. And then there's quite a bit in the chat about using the star ratings. One person said they didn't know it existed. Okay, great. So this is all really good information. Thank you, guys. All right, next slide, please. All right, so for a CMF to be able to be included in the CMF Clearinghouse, we establish criteria in order to help us be as consistent as possible with the data repository. The study, report, or publication where the CMF comes from must be based on crash data. It must have had the objective of quantifying the safety effect of a roadway feature or characteristic. It must be focused on characteristics that are engineering in nature, and the study must have explicitly presented CMF values or functions. Our team does not derive CMFs. They must be presented in the published document. Okay, all right, next slide, please. Recently, there have been discussions about the pros and cons of expanding the inclusion criteria for the CMF Clearinghouse to non-engineering CMFs, for example, including behavioral CMFs, so long as they meet the other criteria, example being based on crash data, explicitly presented CMF values, etc. Please take a moment to fill in the blank. This is kind of like one of those Mad Libs kind of activities. So from my perspective, so you personally, expanding the CMF Clearinghouse to include non-engineering CMFs is a blank idea. So you can put in anything you want. It can be any kind of adjective. Maybe you think that's a fantastic idea. Maybe you think that's a terrible idea. Whatever you feel, please feel free to fill in the answer box. I'm not exactly sure how that will look on the results, but we'll go with the flow here. Oh, and someone put into the chat, what would be an example of a behavioral or a non-engineering CMF? So for example, there might be a research report that actually created CMFs for, say, high visibility enforcement. That's a type of non-engineering CMF. Okay. I don't know, Caroline, if it'll show us the responses or how that works. It just shows that you guys put stuff in. So it's not giving me the actual responses individual. It's not a word cloud, unfortunately. So we'll try to summarize the results as part of our information about the webinar. Thank you guys. And some really great comments in the chat as well. It looks like, there's some thoughts on, and I agree, it's a good idea if we do it well, right? And that's true of pretty much anything. So next slide, please. And now I'm going to turn it over to Srini to tell you more about the CMF Clearinghouse before we hear from our two speakers. Srini?
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to provide, to show you the some screenshots of the CMF Clearinghouse website. All right, next slide. Okay. So for those of you, for those of you who are not very familiar with the CMF Clearinghouse, this is just a screenshot of the homepage. What you see is in the top, there's a series of pull-down menus with a variety of information, and I will go through some of them in the next few slides. The information in the middle does change a bit periodically. What you're seeing right now, you have on the left, what are CMFs? So that's introductory background information about CMFs. And then in the middle, you have information about the webinar that we are currently hosting, the upcoming webinar, as well as the CMF Clearinghouse update. And if you click on that, you'll get information about the newsletter that went out very recently. Okay. Now to the very first menu in the top about the Clearinghouse. So this pull-down menu includes information about the Clearinghouse and some information that will be useful includes things like the user guide, the brochure, the newsletter, webinars that have been hosted. We have an annual webinar, the frequently asked questions, the glossary, the star quality rating, which I'll talk about in a few slides, in relation to the highway safety manual and any other information in the news. The next menu on using CMFs, this includes a variety of documents and trainings published by Federal Highway. So some of the examples are CMFs in Practice series published by Federal Highway, the Quick Start Guide, methods for combining CMFs, and the training videos. Developing CMFs. So this menu may be largely used by those people who are developing CMFs. So these could be researchers, consultants, but also could be some practitioners who actually develop CMFs. But in addition, they could also be used by people who want to be able to review other studies and judge the quality of CMFs that are developed by others. Now, the series of documents that you see in this under this menu, they include documents developed by Federal Highway, as well as some by NCHRP. So this menu here, the additional resources, provides some other resources that are related to CMS. For example, one of them is developing SPFs. Now, SPFs are safety performance functions, which are crash prediction models that are used to predict the number of crashes as a function of site characteristics. Now, depending on the method that is used to develop CMFs, some of these methods make use of SPFs. So it's a related topic that that may be useful and interesting for a lot of people. And in addition to that, you have information about countermeasure selection, cost-benefit analysis, state-selected CMF lists, as well as links to the highway safety manual. Okay. When you want to search for a CMF, you can do this in different ways. You can use the countermeasure name, study abstract, like a study citation, or you can use a single CMF ID. This is something that we're going to talk about in the end as well, or all the fields. Okay. You can also filter CMFs depending on your specific needs. And this is where we have made an update recently. Now, the example that you see in the screen is about a search that was done for roundabouts, and we found there are 384 CMFs. And you see on the left-hand side, the items that you can use for screening. For example, if you're just interested in 4-star and 5-star CMFs, and that's what you see on the right part of the screen, the number of CMFs available comes down from 384 to 55, which is, indicated on the top of the screen. Okay. Okay, you can also compare CMFs, and this may provide insight into why CMFs may be different, and there may be CMFs from the same study or from different studies and why they could be different. Okay, so this here shows essentially the screen that you get when you try to compare CMFs, and the differences between the CMFs could be due to crash type, could be crash severity, traffic volume, the type of area, rural versus urban, what type of road is it in, the number of lanes, etc. So this screen can be used to compare the CMFs and determine why they may be different or similar between multiple CMFs. Okay, and also for each CMF, you can get more detail about in addition to the star quality rating, what points it obtained, and any other caveats and comments that were added by the raters about the particular CMF. Okay, so once you do a search for a CMF, there are a couple of ways of downloading the CMFs for your own purpose. One is, okay, so let's say you have identified a certain number of CMFs using a search, and you can explore and export these results to Excel, and that will essentially just download the ones that you specifically identified in your search. On the other hand, you can also download the complete CMF Clearinghouse database, and for that, if you go into using CMFs menu, you can click on Data Download, and you can download the CMFs, the complete list, either as an Excel document, CSV document, or an XML document. And this is something that we update periodically. Okay. Now to the rating system. For some of you who've been following or using the Clearinghouse for many years, the Clearinghouse started in 2009, and at the time, we established a particular rating system. And then many years later, there was an NCHRP project that was done, NCHRP 17-72, and which was in a way, the goal was to provide CMFs or documentation or guidance to be used with the second edition of the upcoming second edition of the Highway Safety Manual. And as part of that effort, we also revised or updated the rating system to be more rigorous, more detailed, include more factors more explicitly. So a few years ago, so essentially we shifted from the older rating system to the new star rating system. Okay, now to a poll, next poll. You have two questions. One is, were you aware that there is a new rating system? So two options here, yes or no. All right. So it looks like about 30%, 29% were aware that there is a new rating system that we transferred a few years ago, but a large number of them are not aware. So there is actually information in the Clearinghouse about the new rating system, and I think there will be some information that you can pull up even after the meeting about that. And the second question, did you know that the states post preferred CMF list on the CMF Clearinghouse? And the option is yes. I use it frequently. Yes, but my state is not listed or I don't use it. No, how do I find these lists? And this does not apply to me. So 4 options. All right. So the response, about 17% say yes, and I use it frequently. 10% yes, but my state is not listed or I don't use it. 66% say no, how do I find these lists? And 8% say this does not apply to me. Again, there is a, in the website, there is a location where you can locate this information. All right. The next slide here, talking about the updated ratings. Again, this is a screenshot from 2 years ago, but the information updated ratings is actually available in the if you go into about the clearinghouse, there is a menu item that shows the current rating system. So it talks about the number of points that are then how we assign points for different studies based on the quality of studies, based on the data, and so on the study design. So there's more information available in the clearinghouse about how we do this. All right. So I think back to you. Sarah, back to you.
And
Actually, we're going to go to our presenters.
And while our next presenter is preparing to share their screen and video, just a reminder, if you all have a question for the speakers, please use the Q&A functionality, the chat monitoring for things as they come up, but Q&A is a good way for others to know what you're asking, and we'll do our best to address those after each presentation and then at the end of the session as well.
Okay, great. Raul.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and now I can see you. Wonderful.
All right. Seems like my lighting is doing this. I think it takes a second to stabilize. So no, I'm not in a party. But yeah, let's start. It seems like it's stopping that. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for your interest in CMFs and all the work that's done in this space. Excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation to present on this work. This is about a project I led a few years back. And it was about developing CMFs for bicycle treatments at intersections. First, I would like to give some acknowledgements. This is work that I did while I was part of Texas A&M Transportation Institute, and that was work that we did for FHWA, specifically for the pool fund study that FHWA manages for evaluation of low-cost safety improvements. This pool fund study, as I say, FHWA manages, but I think it's 41 or 42 states that pool their money to do these studies. So acknowledgement of that. The publication number you can see there in the slide. So you can search for that number if you want to see the report and all the full details. I will not be able to cover everything today. But also you can, in the clearinghouse, if you find the CMFs that come out of this study and just go clicking around the details about the study, eventually you will arrive to this publication that's available online in PDF. But I want also to acknowledge my team members that were very critical in developing this CMF and the work that goes behind it. So I wanted to acknowledge Bonnie Kutela, still with TTI, and Xiao Li, who was at the time a postdoc when we did this study. So let me give you a quick introduction. What is the problem? If you're in the safety community, or if you follow the statistics, it is a little troubling that bicycle fatalities have been going up since 2010, and in 2022 we actually reached back the high point that was not reached since 1975. So that is concerning. You got, in fact, I think that that year was the last time, 75, the last time that we had more than 1,000 deaths in the US. In bicyclists, and you see that the trend was downward until about 2010, that there's this sharp going up. In 2022 we got that spike. 2023 preliminary numbers, I think we've been looking at that they're actually slightly a little less, but still on the high end of that trend that you see over there. So it's there's a trend problem that we've been the research community has been concerned about and trying to do some work to try to improve safety for bicyclists. Most bicycle deaths now happen in the urban environment compared to before. And you see the next plot over there that most of the crashes now, it's about 80% fatalities happen these days for bicyclists in urban environments. And that was not the case before. In the 70s, that was 50-50 urban and rural, but that's a trend that it is in the data. And then the last thing that I want to mention here is about a third of the bicycle deaths occurred at intersections in 2022. So clearly working at making things better, safer for bicyclists at intersection is a good way to hopefully, track back on this trends. So let me talk real quick about the study design and the data. The objective, as you can at this point imagine, is to develop evaluations on treatments and intersections for bicyclists. And to do these types of studies, you need to follow the data, right? So specifically where you have the volumes, where you want to compare a site with a treatment and a site without a treatment that have similar volumes or control for the volume, so that you're apples to apples, right? So we follow where there's enough exposure for the bicycles, where there's safety, classical safety data, if you will, like the crashes, the volumes for the vehicles, which ADT is the metric that is widely available, the infrastructure, and of course the interventions you're looking at. So you follow the data. So the sites were selected basically where we could see the data elements that we need, and also enough variation in those distributions so that we can contrast with and without the treatment. And so initially we were looking at actually 5 states: Washington, Oregon, Florida, Texas, and Virginia. Did a little survey of the intersections, the treatments present there, the type of exposure data that there was for bicyclists. And in the end, we decided to go with Texas and Virginia, mostly following the exposure and how confident we were about that data. And also the number of sites that we could get in the end, right? Corridors first at that stage before making the decision. But the bicycle exposure data was treated or was obtained differently for the 2 states. One of the reasons why we didn't want to mix them in the analysis, among others. But in the case of Virginia, safety engineer from VDOT gave us access to EcoCounter database, where they have historical counts in some stations, and basically we chose locations that were in the same corridor, relatively close to that station, so we can basically take that number, dot count, and make the estimation for the sites that we were studying. So Virginia, we had directly counts for our intersections. And in the case of Texas, TxDOT has had for years, and I don't know at this point still, but at the time of the study, they did have a contract with a crowdsource company that provided trips, Strava, if you were familiar with it. That's the source of the data. And some other researchers with TTI were doing work with this data and developing models to from those counts, basically get estimates for the daily volume. So we leveraged that data and that knowledge that others had developed to get some estimates of the exposure in the case of Texas. So we did collect the data, and in the case of Virginia, that represented Alexandria, Arlington, Blacksburg, Charlottesville, Richmond, and Roanoke. Sadly, for the signalized intersections, which is the class with the highest frequencies that we saw in these corridors, we only had 59 in the case of Virginia. So modeling explicitly intersections as the points of analysis is a little tricky because of the methods. Maximum likelihood requires bigger samples of data points. So we decided to, in the case of Virginia, analyze it by intersection periods, which would be yearly counts. And in that case, we had 236. This way, we can believe our p-values, but that doesn't add more power in terms of how much data you have. The number of crashes is, I think, what drives these results anyway. Analyze it one way or the other. The data from the echo counters we had from 2015 and 2019 through 15 through 19, so it's 5 years. Same, we matched the crash data for that period. And all said and done, all collected, we could only, with the filters that the crash databases give you, we could only identify 24 bike crashes, which is discouraging in terms of trying to get the CMF for that type of crashes, right? Compared to pedestrians, these ones tend to be more rare in the databases. And we suspect, not necessarily for Virginia, but in general, they may tend to be underrepresented or underreported, which for sure, I'm more confident that will be the case in the Texas one, since we had more sites, as you can see there, 126 intersections in Austin and Houston. The Strava data, 16 to 19. The crash data, we expanded up to 16 and 17, but the crash, we actually had a couple more years to get that, and still we had only 30 bicycle crashes identified. So about this underreporting, there's some results that actually kind of support that theory, but still a theory. We just work with what's explicitly in the data, right? So given these characteristics, we decided to do the analysis for total, fatal, and injury, and bicycle, which is the one that you probably will be more interested in looking for the bicycle safety, but also since these interventions affect the design of the intersections, so you would expect that other users of the roads would benefit from the interventions as well, right? So what are the interventions, the treatments that we studied? So got the corridors where we got the volumes identified, and then we were looking at differences at the intersections. And here, when I say intersections, you probably want to think into areas, the square, the box where the signalized intersection happens, and also the characteristics of the legs that arrive to the intersections. And in this case, were 4-legged intersections that we looked at. And so for the image that you see over there, one way that it's a treatment that we could assess is, well, is there a bike lane or not? And also, how does the bike lane get treated in the intersection? Here you have a difference. You have a bike lane that arrives right up to the bar, stop bar, and had the in the bottom you actually have buffered in the upper, like would be left bound approach. You actually have a buffer between the bike lane and the vehicles, and also in the bottom there will be the right bound side, if you follow me. There's pylons separating the bike lane and the through lanes of the vehicle. So that's one thing that was present enough that we could actually make a statistical assessment. And other of the treatments is in the box area that I mentioned earlier. You have those extension lines helping the users of the driver of the intersections know where everybody's supposed to go and everybody's supposed to be, and also the chevrons for the bicycle lanes, and also the color markings to make things a little more obvious for everybody in the intersection. So we had enough for those to make a comparison. Some more innovative approaches, or less common, if you will. For example, the two-stage crossings or left turns for the bicyclists, that you have that little box in the upper figure, that bicyclists are supposed to go there and then wait another moment in the cycle of the signal to take the left turn. And the one on the bottom, if you're in the West Coast, you probably are familiar with the bike box, which they're very popular there, but also we had some in the sample that we analyzed. So those were a couple of other treatments that we identified from our data set. And finally, there's more traditional tried and true designs, and also that could be compared in the case of having a bicycle lane. So in the figure above, you see the keyway design, which is basically you extend the bicycle lane from the approach to the bar, to the stop bar, but there's a section that it's signed in a way that it allows the right turning vehicles to go to the other side, to the right side of the bike lane. But the part that remains is the keyway, which we had some for evaluation as well. And then the other approach, which is a different philosophy, you see in the bottom, which I think in the lit review, we found some European studies that would suggest that this is safer, with the logic that they were saying that the bicyclist the bicycle lane should be ended some distance upstream, and then it's basically allowing the traffic and the bicycles to use the same space, so that you're preventing or reducing the risk for the right hook situation that if you bring the bike lane to the intersection may actually be more likely. So that's one thing that the literature suggests. So we had enough sites to take a look at that as well. So let me walk you through the analysis and results. So in the case of Virginia, as I said, we had few intersections, but if we break it down by year, then we have enough data points that we can do some analysis that we can believe the p-values, but the analysis tool is different. So if you're familiar, this is a mixture of Poisson and log normal distribution. Don't want to go into the details of that, but it's appropriate for the structure of the data. But the crash data is yearly in that type of analysis. We use propensity score weighting to try to balance a little bit any differences that when the data was collected we found, and I'm going to have a slide later just on that. And the things that I consider explicitly, as you imagine, vehicle and bicycle exposure, geometry and other features, and of course, the treatments we're looking at. The case of the Texas data is essentially the same workflow, but the tool is different. We use directly negative binomial regression because in that case, we had 126 intersections, so enough data for that type of analysis. We can believe those p-values. So the data is aggregated for the 4-year period that we had, and it's yearly accounted for in the model. Propensity score weighting was added in this particular analysis as well. And for those who are not familiar, propensity score weighting is one way that when you see differences in other variables that are important to predict safety between the sites that had the treatment and the sites that don't have the treatment, this technique allows you to basically balance out those differences so that the estimation you're making for the comparing treated sites versus untreated sites is more likely to just represent that intervention and not be some other picking up a difference that it's based off another variable, if that makes sense. So here on the left, you have different distributions of bicycle trips, daily bicycle trips on the sites that are treated and the sites that are not treated, the comparison ones. When you apply the weights, and the weights come from an analysis, that it's not that I decide I'm going to weight this a little bit more of that. It's just basically a pre-analysis you run, if you will, for those differences, and then apply the weights as documented in the statistical literature. And then you see on the right that those distributions are very similar now, and so the results are more likely to be, the treatment and not this difference that you see over here. The overlap is basically the distribution that is represented by such analysis. Anyway, let me go straight to the results. In the case of Virginia, we did those comparisons, and sadly, no CMFs were significant at the 10% significance level. Most of them were smaller than 1, which, if you remember at the beginning, that means reductions, but we don't have enough data, I guess, here to say, okay, this is a strong signal. There's noise in these numbers, and the p-value on the second to last column tells you that. The smaller that is, the more unlikely the result is. Therefore, there's more evidence behind it. So there's a couple here that are bigger than 1, but those are widely insignificant. So good news that we don't have evidence that doing any of these things is bad. But sadly, also from this data set, we don't have evidence that supports benefit in these types of crashes. In the case of Texas, we did find, however, a couple of statistically significant CMFs. So in the first case for total crashes, the separated bike lane compared to no bike lane at all at the intersection had a reduction of about 45%. Total crashes with a p-value which is smaller than 0.1, that's 10% significance, which is good news. That is a signal that is supported by the statistical analysis. Fatal and injury crashes, we interestingly enough find some evidence supporting that description that I gave you about the European research that we found, saying basically if you end up the bike lane before the approach and then allow the bicycles to mix. Well, it seems like at least at this level in this data set, we did find that compared to no bike lane at all, it's significantly fewer crashes. In the last column table here, just wanted to point out that that's our approach to see, okay, if we are using a data set that may have underreported bicycle crashes, if we take away the rainy or windy situations that are less likely to have bicycles on the road, as you can imagine, weather may affect the decision of going riding more than the decision of going on a car. So we would expect that the signals are stronger for the non-weather related crashes. And indeed, when we run the analysis for that subset, the signals are stronger both in the size of the reduction and also in the significance. So this is basically supporting our, at least some level of evidence supporting our theory that we are actually have underreported bicycle crashes. And I'm gonna finalize the presentation just giving you some other research that is related and is consistent with these findings. And also complementary, so hopefully you can see it complementary and use them in that way. 2021, we did a similar study for FHWA for the same program, but this was on segments, not intersections. And basically we found that adding a bike lane without reducing or without changing the width of the road had a reduction in total crashes, similar to the one that we see from the intersections. So you can think of this one as a complementary study. The one that I just presented on as intersections, but combined with what you do in segments when you add the bike lane, reducing lane widths and shoulder widths, you actually should expect some reductions in crashes. And the most recent one that it's very related to this, remember that we found statistically significant bike lane, separated bike lane. This study just looked at that specific treatment on 3 cities and had a big enough data set with bicycle crashes to develop that CMF. And the CMF is significant and a reduction. Comparing it to just a traditional bike lane, we actually have maybe about half crashes, bicycle crashes can be reduced by that treatment after controlling for exposure and the other important variables. The publication numbers are there, so you can find the reports, and also I'm sure that these ones are also in the clearinghouse. And at this point, just wanted to thank everybody for your attention and your interest. You have my contact over there. Feel free to reach out and get further questions, but right now I can entertain any questions that may be in the chat. Should I stop sharing my screen or?
You can keep sharing, Raul. Thank you. Just a couple quick questions since you just presented. One person asked, are all of these treatments at signal controlled intersections?
Yes, sir. Or ma'am, yes.
And another question is, what are the speeds on these roads?
I don't have that at hand, but I think it's one of the variables that we had over there. If it didn't make it into the formal analysis, it means that there wasn't any significant differences by speed that we find. So off the top of my head, I'm thinking 35 to 45, but I would need to get back to you on that and read the details. This is a couple of years ago that we did this.
And that question is from Perry Frank, just so we can keep record of it. And another question is whether this analysis is a before or after or a cross-sectional. Can you clarify?
Yes, it's a cross-sectional in that we went and collected data from basically based on the sites and without regard of, okay, when was this installed? And we compare before and after. So no, it wasn't a before and after, it's a cross-sectional. And yes, before and after is preferred, but cross-sectional is pretty fine when you do it right, and it's an alternative that you have when the data is a challenge, as it was in this case. Yeah.
And I think we have time for one more question, and this is, does the data reflect e-bikes or a mix?
I would say no, it will be bikes. You know, you got the count by user type, and to what extent the counters are able to differentiate those, and I'm not sure, but for example, the eco counters, I think they recognize the features of the vehicle, so I don't know how much they will be able to determine that difference. And in the case of Strava, I would hope that maybe is similar. So probably the data does not allow us to differentiate that, and so I guess you would actually have to have a sense of the prevalence of that type of bicycle in the years that we analyzed at the locations that we did. So no, we didn't, and then we couldn't control for that.
Thank you. I think we will save some of these questions for the section at the end. Rita, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
And for some reason, I'm not being able to turn on my video. It says that you cannot start your video. Okay, yeah.
There you are.
Okay.
We can see you. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here today. And I'm glad that I'm a part of the presentation. So let me start the presentation. So today I'll be talking about study that I conducted while I was at UCF with Dr. Muhammad Abdulati, and this was a study on rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And this study was conducted in the state of Florida. For as an overview for the presentation, I would start with the problem statement, then the introduction and research gap, what was important that this study was conducted, the data collection method in brief, methodology of the statistical analysis, etc. The results, and finally the conclusions and the takeaways. So I would like to start a poll at this time to get the knowledge about the audience. So I'll wait for a couple of seconds.
And the question is, how familiar are you with rectangular rapid flashing beacons? Very familiar, somewhat familiar, or not familiar?
So it seems like about 59% of the audience is familiar, very familiar with RRFB, and very few percentage have not known what RRFBs are. So that's good to know moving forward while explaining what RRFBs are. So seems like it did, okay. Yeah, so as many of you know that RRFBs are like flashing beacons, like flashing lights that are mounted in pedestrian signs, crossing signs at mid-block pedestrian crossing locations, as well as some other locations. And those are actually actuated by the pedestrian themselves, and which increases the conspicuity and like gets the attention of the driver to slow down or stop for the pedestrians that are crossing. So looking at the problem statement, I'm sure like it's already familiar now how pedestrian crashes and fatalities are increasing in the last few years. And you can see from the picture from GHSA in the last 3 years, it's an increasing trend. It's about 19% surge in pedestrian deaths. And in 2022, about 7,500 pedestrians were killed on the roads, and 18% of all the crash fatalities are pedestrian crashes. And mainly, everybody knows that pedestrian crashes tends to be more severe, and a pedestrian is 1.5 times more likely than a passenger vehicle occupant to be killed in a car crash. And Florida is a state which has this concern of pedestrian crashes and like high severity crashes, fatalities of pedestrians for a long time. So I would like to know at this point, like, how effective do you think RRFBs are at mid-block crossings? So I'll wait for a couple of seconds for the poll.
And the potential responses are very effective, somewhat effective, or not effective.
Yeah, it's good to see that 42% of the audience is telling that RRFBs are very effective, and 56% are somewhat effective. So from the results of the study, we'll see how we can change this view. So to explain why this research was conducted in the first place, this is a research that was conducted simultaneously with another project that was going on at the time, which was real-time like video data collection analysis of the pedestrian and vehicle interactions. But we had, but Florida DOT had a huge data set of RRFB locations and the installation dates. So it was very it was good to know the CMFs from that data set. So that's why the study was conducted in the first place. And with the lit review, it showed that there were very limited studies that actually calculated CMFs for effectiveness of RRFBs. Mainly, there were two previous studies that looked into the CMF calculation, but they had limitations in sample size and limitation of number of years of data or range of installation dates. And the ratings were also low. As we were discussing ratings earlier, Dr. Raghavan was talking about those. But this study had the opportunity to obtain a huge number of locations from the entire state of Florida. And we could include around 154 treatment sites and 158 control sites that were later like as part of the study, we chose the control sites later and we could include that. And this was a good amount of data set for the project. We also had a huge range of installation dates from 2013 to 2018, providing the opportunity for more crash data to be incorporated in the study. So this study was first submitted to TRB, and the left side in the CMF Clearinghouse, you can find the study from the TRB presentation, and a star quality rating of 4 was assigned to it. Later on, that paper was modified a little bit and submitted to Journal of Transportation Engineering, and that link is provided in the AC library. You can visit and look up the study, and if you have any further questions, feel free to email me later. So a brief lit review of the two studies that I was talking about. They had, for the data, they were both done in 2017, and the data set from Monserrat et al. Study was around 8 treatment and 13 comparison groups, and the installation dates range from 2011 to 2014. The study conducted a simple before and after analysis and a comparison group analysis, and the results showed that a CMF of 0.64 and to 0.78 was assigned for the RRFBs, and for the comparison group analysis for 2012 data, it was 0.10, implying that RRFBs were capable of reducing 90% of the pedestrian crashes. And for 2011, it was 0.63. So, but the standard errors were relatively high for the results. Another study that's used 46 locations across different states and combinations of the different types of RRB locations, and they conducted a cross-sectional analysis, and the CMF was calculated to be 0.5. So overall, we can see that the RRFBs were showing a good CMF of less than 1, showing the potential of decreasing pedestrian crashes. For this study, as I said before, the locations of the RRFBs were obtained from all the districts of Florida, and the range was quite big. There were more than 200 initial sites that we gathered information for, but due to incorporating crash data that we had at that time, we used 2012 to 2019, 8 years of crashes, and selected control sites which are similar to the treatment sites, but they didn't have the treatment. So, apart from that, the roadway data, traffic data, etc., was obtained. Another huge effort was also given to calculate the exposure of pedestrians in the study. We didn't have the count of pedestrian, pedestrian volume. So we tried to use a XGBoost model or machine learning models to calculate the pedestrian volumes from basically mainly from other variables that were available, like traffic data and roadway data, exposure data, etc. But it didn't come up to be significant in the model, so we ended up not using the pedestrian exposure variable, but instead sticking with the ADT. So in this slide, you can see the number of treatment and control sites for each of the districts of Florida. It was well spreaded and similar to each other. I have put this slide up with the descriptive statistics for in general to use later for any variable. We had information about speed limits. It ranged from 25 to 55 miles per hour, and AADTs. We also gathered information about the land usage, the surrounding areas, and calculated the land use mix. So going straight to the safety performance functions, you can see that several different models were created since we had the data. So we first, the SPFs were developed using negative binary generalized linear models, and we generated models for total pedestrian crashes, then fatal and injury pedestrian crashes. Another group was only the injury pedestrian crashes. And then we also incorporated models for total crashes, irrespective of whether it was pedestrian or what type of crashes, like total crashes. And then with only the rear end crashes, and then the non-pedestrian crashes. Across the models, you can see that speed limit and raised median came to be a significant, both were significant in quite many of the models, but you might be intrigued about why the coefficient signs are that way. So it was seen that when speed limit was higher, the pedestrian crashes were less. This can be since the lower number of pedestrians crossed higher speed limit facilities, thus due to the likelihood that pedestrian activity is lower at roadways with higher speed limits. The models are capturing opposite relationship. On the other hand, more pedestrian crashes were involved with roadway cross sections having raised median compared to other types of median in the study. And we were investigating more why is this happening, and this can be due to the fact that the raised medians were placed in the higher volume urban areas with surrounding businesses with more pedestrian activities. So these were some of the different variables that were significant. Now talking about the actual CMFs that we got from the study, for the total pedestrian crashes and for the different type of pedestrian crashes scenarios that we looked at, the CMFs range from around 0.3, 0.31, showing that RRFBs were significantly reducing pedestrian crashes in the order of like 69%, 70%. And the standard errors of these models were low, around 0.03, 0.031. So like the results had produced greater confidence with the results. In the next slide, I just briefly added the conclusions from the study. The study involved many other aspects as well, like calculation of CMFs for the other scenarios like total crashes, non-pedestrian crashes, and rear-end crashes, as well as computing the cost-benefit analysis for the RRFBs, as well as also providing information about the CM functions, crash modification functions, so that if needed for different scenarios or site-based models, the CMF functions can provide different crash modification factors specific to that site. So in conclusion, the current study contributes to explore the safety effectiveness of RRFBs on reducing the pedestrian crashes. The main contribution of this paper was to develop better CMFs with higher accuracy because we had a larger sample of treatment and control locations. And additionally, the results showed that small standard errors of the CMFs were increase certainty of the CMF values and reliability on the estimates. Another study that was done after that, which was basically using the data that was gathered in this previous study. This was more looking into the injury severity levels. So basically, what are the factors that are affecting injury severity at pedestrian crossing locations with RRFBs in place and not? And this paper also dealt with comparison between machine learning and statistical models. So I have provided the link to the publication and you can probably visit there and let me know if you have any questions. So basically, this study applied XGBoost machine learning model and random parameter discrete outcome models for analyzing the crash severity levels. And since we had a huge, since we had many locations for treatment and control, at the end, we had a huge crash severity data set of around more than 35,000 observations when we put together the crash level, driver level, vehicle level, all these data. So this data set was ideal for machine learning approaches as well. So we used random parameters ordered logic model because there was heterogeneity in the data because of multiple observations from the same driver or same like timeline. So I wouldn't go deep into explaining the models, but generally, as we use for ordered model for the injury severity, there were 5 different discrete levels of the Capco scale. So this model, apart from RRFBs, also had different other factors to look at, like how those factors were affecting crashes at pedestrian crossing locations. But we were mainly looking at the RRFBs, what RRFBs did to the crash severity levels. And it was seen that the negative coefficient showed that RFBs were capable of reducing the injury severity levels of the crashes. We looked at different crash scenarios, whether it was pedestrian crashes or nighttime crashes or all types of crashes, all the different scenarios. For the XGBoost model, though, we were only able to do it for the all types of crashes and the nighttime crashes. We couldn't do for the pedestrian crashes because of the less number of observations. The results from the XGBoost model showed that the confusion matrices were calculated for the different scenarios, and it was seen it provided higher accuracy of the models. So it showed that the prediction level was around 97% accurate. The right side images showed the SHAP values showing which variable provided what kind of correlation with the injury severity levels. And as I said before, we compared these two models, and the results are provided in this slide. So basically, from the XGBoost models, it was seen that RRFB increases conspicuity at night and thus reduces the severity of the nighttime crashes. RRFBs reduced the fatal, also was seen to reduce the fatal and serious injury nighttime crashes according to the SHAP values. From the statistical models, we also compared between the random parameters model as well as the fixed effects models, and it was seen that the random parameters models were performing better in terms of AIC and BIC values. RRFB showed significant reduction in severity for pedestrian crashes. For the nighttime crashes model, it was used to compare both between the XGBoost and the statistical model, and it was seen that the XGBoost model was seen to be providing 97% of accuracy, whereas the statistical models, it was providing around 73.8% accuracy. So just to take away, studies that are providing machine learning models with severity can be more providing with more accurate data, or CMFs, or not CMFs, like the results. Yeah, so those were the results in brief from the study. At this point, I would like to answer any questions that you will have, and my email is listed in the first slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amrita. So we'll take a couple minutes, questions directly for you. One is, can you draw any conclusions about the speed limit and the RRFB effectiveness?
From the study, we had speed limits from 25 to 55 miles per hour. And the sign was basically opposite. So we dug into the data and it was seen that we had less number of pedestrians in the higher speed limit areas. So it might be interesting to see like making two different models or separate models for a higher speed limit versus lower speed limit, and see what speed limit is doing to the model. But at this point, I don't have any like accurate conclusion about what speed limit a variable would do for RRFBs. But mainly more RRFBs are located in like mid-block crossings. So mainly lower speed limit areas are more like not, I wouldn't say accurate, like more like availability of RRFBs are more in lower speed limit areas.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, were 4-lane roads evaluated separately from 2-lane roads?
All of, I am not sure 100% about the number of lanes. I need to check the data set and get back to you on that. Yeah, this was done a few years back, so I have, yeah, it's not there at the top of my head. I'm sorry, but I can get back on that.
That's okay. And that's actually a good reminder for us, or opportunity for us to tell everyone that we are getting through as many questions and answers as we can today. And those we can't, or some that the presenters may want to expound on, we'll have a posted Q&A document on the CMF Clearinghouse webinar website after the fact in 2025. And let me see if I can find another one just for you, Amrita. What softwares did you use for the statistical analysis?
I used the software R. Yeah.
Great.
R. So yeah.
And then one more question, can you describe what is meant by a mid-block location? Does that mean that there is no intersection, no traffic signal, no other street conditions?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So mainly between two proper intersections, which are signalized or may not be signalized, between the like two adjacent intersections, there can be some pedestrian crossings, like crossing just for the pedestrians, where maybe there's a sign of pedestrian crossing, or the crossing, the pavement marking of the crossings. Those are generally like the mid-block pedestrian crossings, and those crossings are ideal for providing the RRFBs because it provides more conspicuity, more visible flashing lights, and it's also actuated by the pedestrian. So those are very good like candidates for RRFB locations.
Great, thank you. And I will go ahead and open up the Q&A to our other panelists if you all want to start sharing your video. We have a couple, actually we had 26 questions that have already been asked and answered through the software. So I'll go ahead and ask some of the ones that were upvoted. One is, how do you use CMFs and account for crashes in areas when you believe there are many unreported crashes? Do you have an adjustment? And Srini, if you want to state what you already stated, or I can read it.
I already answered the question. Yeah, that's a difficult question because we are relying on the users, to conduct a study and include crashes that are reported. I don't think most cases they don't have access to the crashes that are not reported. So it's yeah, that's a difficult problem to address. I think. I don't know if you have any, any other comments from either Sarah or Raul or Amrita.
I agree with you, Srini. No, it's you work with the data that's available, even though you may have suspicion that there may be some crashes that were not severe. For example, a bicycle, just a little bruise or something, and then just drive right away. Well, that's not going to be in the data, but what can you do to evaluate that, right? So yeah, it's a tough question. Really not sure what to do about that.
Can I please get the question once more? I'm sorry. What was the?
It was a question of how do you use CMFs and account for crashes in areas where you believe there are many unreported crashes?
Oh, okay. So lots of zero values, or like maybe using zero inflated models. Can we say?
No, I think the question goes along the lines of you have, say, I don't know, 100 crashes. What if they were 150 and 50 were not reported at all? So those are not in your data, right? If I'm getting that correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no.
Okay, Sarah, here's a question for you. What are the CMFs rating system based on?
Sure thing. And I know I provided a link in the Q&As to that, and I'm trying to look at, yeah, so the CMF Star Quality Rating System is based off of the system that was developed by NCHRP Project 17-72, update of crash modification factors for the Highway Safety Manual. That was, of course, the update. That is the one that Srini and I were talking about earlier about how the rating system was actually updated, and then all of the CMFs were retroactively updated for the rating based on this updated rating system. So I did put a link directly in the Q&A response. So if you click on that, and then there's actually a couple other links directly to the NCHRP project, as well as some other things, you can find exactly how things are rated. And I believe someone else was asking about the preponderance of sites and everything. There's actually categories based off of the type of analysis you do, whether that's cross-sectional or before and after. You're going to see that there's different point values for individual things that it looks at. So it's very specific. I mean, it's not a perfect system, but it does its best to try to take the research that is done and evaluate it, and based off of the data that is presented, and then provide a very simple to use 5-star safety, star quality rating as a result. So take a look at that, and hopefully that will help you.
Thank you. And another question more generally about CMFs, are there incentives for professionals outside the research space to develop CMFs, SPFs, given that some professionals may be more directly involved with the impacts during the life of a project? And Srini, you and Sarah both put an answer in there. So you want to go first, Srini?
I think I'll maybe ask Sarah to respond, because I think she had probably more useful response.
Right. And I did, I know that it was asked a couple of times. I did ask, I wasn't really sure what this audience member was using in terms of the word incentive, but I did mention one specific program that we have, which is FHWA's Excellence in Highway Safety Data Award. That wouldn't necessarily be for professionals on the job, if that is specifically what this person was asking about. But it does encourage undergrads and graduate students, and potentially the faculty and staff that they work with to use roadway data to research a safety topic and prepare specifically for the students, for them to prepare for a career in highway safety. The 2025 awards are open, and I put a link directly into the answer, the response that I provided. So if you're interested in that, as far as other types of, I assume you mean monetary awards or incentives, I don't know of any off the top of my head, but again, we will, sort of ask around and try to have a more thorough response for the Q&A, when we're all done.
Okay, and I think that may be all the time we have for questions in this session, because I know there are a few wrap-up slides. Srini, if you'll go ahead and share. But we will, again, as a reminder, we will post these responses very soon.
Yes, and thank you guys, all the audience members, for the great questions. I guess speaking on behalf of myself and the others, it was all that I could do to be trying to answer these questions as quickly as you guys added them. So thank you so much for your participation. Again, as Caroline said, if there are any questions that we weren't able to get to in today's webinar, we will provide written responses and post those to the CMF Clearinghouse website. And a big thank you to Raul and Amrita for their great guest presentations today. Thank you guys so much. They were great. I just have a few more slides before we close out today, including the all-important, PDHs at the end. So one item we're actively promoting is to remember to use the CMF IDs in your documentation. All CMFs in the CMF Clearinghouse have a unique CMF ID, and it allows users to easily reference the CMF in their reports, studies, or presentations, while also allowing users to easily find the CMF through searching for or by the CMF ID. So please do properly document what CMFs you use for your project so that others can follow your work. And that goes not just for research, but also for projects through like state DOTs or implementation projects, because again, if somebody comes along after you, they can look up that ID and understand the research and the reasoning why you selected it. Next slide, please. So Srini, we can go through this one and the next one, but basically you can find the detail on the details webpage. It has the unique URL, and the last digits in the URL represent the CMF ID from the one before. And it's also listed at the top of each CMF details webpage. So you guys can take a look at the slides when they get posted. Next slide, please. And then users can also use the search function, as I mentioned, on the CMF Clearinghouse web homepage to search for a specific CMF ID. All you have to do is type it into the box and hit the search button. Do the drop down there. You can see single CMF ID. You do have to select that, but then you can find the specific CMF that was referenced. All right, next slide, please. And please, please, please remember to always cite the site. Sharing the CMF ID when referencing a specific CMF makes for easy future reference by helping other users easily find the CMF. All right, next slide. And just giving you guys a heads up that the 2023 CMF Clearinghouse Most Wanted list, the team just updated it middle to late of last year. It represents an analysis of user searches made from July 2019 to September 2023, and is posted online at the link there. Essentially, the question was posed was, what are people searching for but not finding? That's how we denote the Most Wanted list. The items listed represent areas where crash-based safety evaluation research is needed, grouped by themes. This list can be used by the safety research community to prioritize research needs statements, particularly those which deal with evaluations of specific countermeasures. I do believe one of our audience members was specifically focused, or I don't know if it was a question, but he said, hey, what about this CMF? So that's a really great thing. Feel free to put it into the search, see if you find one, and if you don't, it gets put into the analysis these guys do when we update our Most Wanted list. Next slide, please. Now, just for the last little bit of updates, we completed the migration to a new FHWA domain URL. Please, please, please update any saved website links, as the old cmfclearinghouse.org domain will only forward people through the middle of 2025. So as of that time, that's going to go away. And if you have those links, they will no longer forward. Secondly, as noted during the presentation and with poll number 3, we're considering if and how we might expand the inclusion criteria for the CMF Clearinghouse. The post-webinar survey will provide you guys with an expanded opportunity to share your thoughts on the matter, along with feedback on today's session. So with that, when you exit the webinar today, a brief post-webinar survey will load. We would very much appreciate your feedback on our performance, and it really won't take you more than a couple minutes. Following today's webinar, you will receive a follow-up email. This email will include a link to download a printable certificate of attendance for 1 hour of professional development instruction. If there are multiple attendees at your site, please forward this link to the other participants so that they can download and print the certificate with their name. And finally, Srini, that concludes this year's webinar on the CMF Clearinghouse. Again, thank you to our presenters today for sharing their experiences and practices with us, and all of you for taking the time to join us today. Thank you, have a great day, and be safe.